grade 6 St. Coral International School. For my science fair project, it's going to be about the circulatory system. The purpose of this project is going to answer these 3 questions. 1. How does the heart work? 2. How does blood flow throughout the body? 3. How does blood become deoxygenated blood to oxygenated blood and vice versa? I assume from my hypothesis is that the heart pumps and the blood travels all throughout the body, then back to the heart, which pumps again to the lungs where gases exchange. From my previous science classes, I learned that the circulatory system consists of 3 main parts. 1. The heart, which is the only muscular organ in the circulatory system. It's a fist-sized muscular organ. 2. The blood vessels, which are arteries, veins, and capillaries. 3. The blood, which travels all throughout the body through the blood vessels. To conduct this experiment, I made a working heart model. I listed the materials I used, the procedures I did, and the working model chart. I also posted the pictures of the procedures. Before I show you how the working model works, I'll first show you how the circulatory system works in this chart. The heart consists of 2 parts, the right side of the heart and the left side. Each has 2 chambers, the right and left atrium and the right and left ventricle. The deoxygenated blood comes from the body and travels through the right atrium to the vena cava. And the oxygenated blood comes from the lungs, travels to the left atrium through the pulmonary vein. When both atriums are filled with blood, they contract and squeeze their blood through the ventricles. The right ventricle then pushes its blood at high pressure, pushes the deoxygenated blood at high pressure to the lungs through the pulmonary artery. And the left ventricle pushes its oxygenated blood through the aorta to the body. We now know how the heart works and how blood flows throughout the body. What about how blood becomes from oxygen-poor blood to oxygen-rich blood and vice versa? When the right ventricle pumps the oxygen-poor blood to the lungs through the pulmonary arteries, oxygen is put into the blood and carbon dioxide is taken out through the process of breathing. Now the deoxygenated blood has become oxygenated blood. Arteries carry the oxygenated blood through the organs and tissues. Oxygen and nutrients enter the organs and tissues through tiny blood vessels called capillaries. The capillaries connect the arteries and veins. When the organs and tissues use up the oxygen, it becomes carbon dioxide. Now the oxygenated blood has become deoxygenated blood. And the capillaries take the deoxygenated blood through the veins and back to the heart. The human circulatory system consists of 2 main circuits, the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. The pulmonary circuit, which provides blood flow between the heart and the lungs, while the systemic circuit allows blood flow from the heart to the rest of the body and back to the heart. Let's get back to our working model. These represents the lungs, these represents the capillaries that surround the organs, and this represents the heart. This represents the vena cava, which enters the right atrium. And this, with the drip chamber, represents the pulmonary artery that exits from the right ventricle. This represents the aorta, which exits from the left ventricle. And this represents the pulmonary vein, which enters the left atrium. Now I'm going to pour blue water that represents the deoxygenated blood in this cup, and red water to represent the oxygenated blood in this cup. Now we're going to see how it works. As you can see, the blood goes from the body to the right atrium and left ventricle where it enters the lungs. And the pulmonary vein enters the left atrium and ventricle and enters the body. From our experiment that the deoxygenated blood that came from the body enters the right atrium, gets contracted to the left ventricle, and gets pumped to the lungs, where the carbon dioxide gets exchanged for oxygen, and now the deoxygenated blood has become oxygenated blood. The oxygenated blood exits the lungs and enters the left atrium, where it gets contracted into the left ventricle. It gets pumped from the arteries and to the rest of the body. Through capillaries, the oxygen is used up and it becomes carbon dioxide. Now oxygenated blood has become deoxygenated blood and enters the heart once again. Thank you so much for listening.